Hey everyone, welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving straight into the hidden mechanics of speciation, the actual, literal process of how nature creates, divides, and isolates the millions of distinct life forms that share our planet. If you've ever looked at the sheer, overwhelming diversity of nature and wondered how it is all organized and maintained behind the scenes, you are absolutely in the right place. Let's get started.
But first, we gotta tackle a massive question. What actually makes a species a species? Sounds totally basic, right? A dog equals a dog. A cat equals a cat. But honestly, when you really zoom in, how do scientists truly draw the hard line between different living organisms? It is actually one of the most fiercely debated puzzles in all of biology. Just to show you how wild this gets, think about this number. 96%. That's roughly the genetic similarity between humans and chimpanzees. We share this absolutely massive chunk of our biological blueprint. And yet, obviously, we are undeniably distinct species. So if genetics alone can't give us a hard, fast boundary, what on earth does?
Here is our roadmap for today. 1. What is a species? 2. The biological species concept. 3. Barriers to reproductive isolation. 4. Patterns of evolutionary change. And 5. Geographies of speciation.
Section 1. What is a species? The definition dilemma. So, for well over a century, scientists have literally been going back and forth on this, creating a complete smorgasbord of definitions. You've got the morphological concept, championed by Cronquist in 1978, basically saying, hey, if they look similar, if they have the same morphology, they're the same species. But then Lotze in 1918 pushed the genetic concept, arguing it's really all about sharing a common gene pool. Fast forward to 1976, Van Valen threw the ecological concept into the ring, defining a species by its distinct adaptive zone, basically who they compete with. And finally, Eldridge and Crackraft's 1980 phylogenetic concept, which groups things by a shared common ancestor. It's like a giant biological puzzle, and with so many competing ideas, biology desperately needed a unifying rule. Which brings us to Section 2, the biological species concept, Mayr, 1942. Okay, so this unifying rule, it largely came from Ernst Mayr, giving us the modern baseline we call the biological species concept. Mayr basically nailed it down like this. A species isn't just about looks. It's an entire group of organisms that can interbreed freely in nature, produce viable, fertile offspring, and, this is crucial, are completely reproductively isolated from other groups. The whole logic here is all about successfully reproducing and locking down that gene pool, keeping it totally separate from outsiders.
But, as brilliant as Mayr's concept is, it's definitely got some fatal flaws. We have to keep these in mind. The rule literally falls apart in two big scenarios. First, asexually reproducing organisms. If a life form doesn't even need a partner to breed, you can't exactly test if it can interbreed freely, right? And second, fossils. We obviously can't ask two T-Rex fossils to try mating to see if they produce viable offspring. So yeah, it's our best working definition for living, sexually reproducing animals, but it is for sure not perfect. Section 3, Barriers to Reproductive Isolation. The art of staying apart.
So if the whole biological species concept hinges on populations staying isolated, how does nature actually enforce that? Well, it sets up two distinct camps of defense. You've got prezygotic barriers. These are the mechanisms that actively block mating before it even gets a chance to start. And then you have postzygotic barriers, nature's biological safety nets that deploy if mating actually does happen. Let's quickly run through these prezygotic, before mating barriers, because the sheer variety is pretty mind-blowing. Habitat, or ecological isolation, means populations just live in totally different environments. Behavioral, or ethological isolation, is when they literally don't recognize each other's mating signals. It's like they're speaking different languages. There's temporal isolation, which is just bad timing. Maybe one breeds in spring and the other prefers the fall. Mechanical isolation is exactly what it sounds like. The physical reproductive parts literally just do not fit together. With gamete fusion isolation, the sperm and egg might meet, but they just can't physically fuse. And lastly, geographic isolation. That's your classic physical wall, like a mountain range, keeping everybody completely apart. Nature really does build a ton of roadblocks here.
But what if all those roadblocks completely fail and mating actually occurs? That's when postzygotic barriers kick in. The zygote or embryo might just be unviable right from the start and fail to develop. Even if a hybrid is actually born, it could face hybrid unviability, meaning it can't survive in the wild, or hybrid sterility, meaning it lives but just can't reproduce. But the really wild one here is hybrid breakdown. We see this in certain species of cotton. The first-generation hybrid is completely 100% fertile. But when those hybrids try to reproduce, the second and later generations completely fail. It is literally nature's ultimate failsafe to keep species apart.
Moving on to Section 4, Patterns of Evolutionary Change, the birth of a species. Now we're getting into the really dynamic part of this explainer, the actual patterns that dictate how these populations transform over huge stretches of time. First up is anagenesis. You can kind of think of this as a straight line of evolution. It is evolution without branches. In anagenesis, an entire population of species A slowly transforms over a massive amount of time directly into species B. The original species basically just upgrades itself out of existence. There's no split, just one continuous changing lineage.
Now contrast that with cladogenesis. This is evolution with branches, and it's probably what you picture when you think of a classic evolutionary tree. Here, an ancestral species literally splits into two or more distinct lineages. This branching process is the whole engine behind biological diversity, taking one starting point and fanning it out into entirely new, distinct paths of life. But you know what? Sometimes evolution just hits pause. We call this Stasigenesis. It's this incredible state of absolutely no evolution over a vastly long period of time. The environmental conditions just perfectly match the organism's current form, so it literally remains unchanged for millions of years.
We often call the results of statigenesis living fossils. The source material gives us two amazing examples here: the velvet worm, Peripatric, and the ginkgo biloba tree. Seriously, if you look at a ginkgo biloba leaf today, you are looking at a biological design that has successfully defied typical evolutionary change. It looks virtually identical to fossils from millions of years ago. It's essentially a living time capsule.
Finally, Section 5, Geographies of Speciation, where evolution happens.
All right, so we've covered the what and the how. Now let's tackle the where, and finally demystify all that complex Patrick jargon. The most common one you'll see is Allopatric Speciation. Step 1, a single population gets geographically separated by a hard physical barrier. Think mountains rising, deserts forming, river shifting. Step 2, because they're cut off, these two groups adapt to their own new environments and form subspecies. Their morphology might start to look different, but they could still technically interbreed if they met. But give it enough time, and step 3 happens. Complete reproductive isolation, an entirely new, distinct species emerge. Now, Sympatric Speciation is a whole different ballgame. This is when new species evolve from an ancestor while they are all still living in the exact same geographic region. No physical barrier whatsoever. Instead, sudden biological changes pop up that isolate a specific group right in the middle of the population. This usually gives us what we call sibling species. They look completely identical to us, same morphology and everything, but they absolutely cannot reproduce with each other.
Next is Parapatric Speciation, which honestly is extremely rare. Imagine a population spread across a continuous geographic range. So again, no walls, no rivers. But they are separated by an extreme sudden change in the habitat itself. Because the environment just drastically shifts, individuals start mating non-randomly. They prefer partners adapted to their specific local niche. This leads to unequal gene flow and eventually results in something called a decline, which is basically a measurable gradient of a single trait spreading across that geographical range. It's literally evolution happening across a visible spectrum of habitat.
And the last piece of this geographic puzzle is Peripatric Speciation. You can kind of think of this as nearby speciation. It happens when a tiny peripheral population gets isolated on the extreme outer edge of the main group's territory. Because this breakaway group is so small, they're only taking a tiny random sample of the original gene pool with them. This sets off the founder effect, leading to massive, rapid genetic drift. It's like evolution in fast forward, building a brand new species right next door to the old one. So, we've covered the definitions, the barriers, the patterns, and the literal geography of how life divides and transforms. But remember, nature is never static. If the branching of cladogenesis and the continuous march of anagenesis never truly stop, it leaves us with a pretty fascinating thought to end on. Just look out your window. What new species are forming around us right now, hidden by invisible barriers and subtle genetic shifts, just waiting a few million years to finally show their true, distinct form? Thanks for hanging out with me for this explainer. Keep observing and definitely keep questioning the incredible mechanics of life all around us.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe.